A director of the now defunct company Pike River Coal is questioning why others didn't face charges over the deaths of 29 men inside the Pike River mine. Stuart Natras says he doesn't believe re-entry is necessary or understand why people would want to go into a tomb. He says he also questions why former mines boss Peter Whittall has been the only one to shoulder blame. His comments come after claims from the mother of Pike River miner Josh Ufer that families were misled by Mr Whittall following the first explosion. Joanne Ufer says Mr Whittall gave family members false hope by telling them the men would be feeding off fresh airlines and there was a refuge for them. Video journalist Logan Church travelled to Australia to meet with Joe Ufer and asked Peter Whittall what he thought about the government's plans to re-enter the mine.
Excuse me, Mr Whittall. Hi, my name's Logan Church. I'm a journalist from Radio New Zealand. I was keen to ask you a few quick questions about Pike River if you had a quick moment.
Former Pike River Coal Chief Executive Peter Whittall. He's declined all interview requests since moving back to his hometown of Wollongong in New South Wales 3 years ago. More from him later. But 4 hours drive north is the small coal mining town of Singleton, population 16,000. 24% of the town's residents work in mining. One of the local papers here is even called at the coalface. Joanne Ufer, her former husband and son Josh all worked in coal mining. And in early 2010, Josh got an opportunity to work at a new mine on the west coast of New Zealand.
He was 25. He'd not long moved to New Zealand on a contract to work at Pike River. He'd worked in the mining industry for 3 or 4 years before that, and worked his way up to sort of like a supervisory role.
Sitting in her lounge here in Singleton, Joanne, or Jo as she likes to be known, tells me about the day her world turned upside down, the 19th of November 2010.
Originally I got a text message to say that an explosion had happened at Pike and Josh was unaccounted for, but I didn't really comprehend what it meant. Even though I work in the industry myself, I wasn't, I just wasn't sure what had happened, and I thought it'd all be okay.
But of course it wasn't.
He was keen for a change. He'd had a few life's ups and downs, and so he wanted to experience something new and different. So he went over there, and he met a girl from Greymouth when he was over there, and they just found out that she was pregnant.
Jo arrived in New Zealand the day after the first explosion, still unsure about what had happened to her son, but knowing he was most probably trapped. Only 2 men, Daniel Rockhouse and Russell Smith, had emerged alive. Despite the fact Peter Whittall had been chief executive for less than 2 months at the time of the first explosion, Jo says she still feels irked that he and other officials gave family members false hope.
I felt at the very beginning he seemed very sincere and, but after all we've heard, we know that he was just sort of feeding us lies, and that probably hurt me the most.
What exactly was he lying about?
What I can remember of the meetings, him saying that, the boys would all be feeding off fresh air lines, that there was a refuge for them, which we found out later through the Royal Commission, that there was no refuge, there was no fresh air lines, like just small things like that, up to, that they, if they could possibly get out, there was that second means of egress, but, it was unachievable, especially if any of them were injured.
But all hope ended after a second explosion 5 days later, on November the 24th at 2:37 in the afternoon, and Jo was forced to return home without closure.
It was really, really hard for me. Leaving, I felt like I was leaving Josh behind, but I was also not a part of it anymore.
The Department of Labour, as it was then known, initially laid charges under the Health and Safety Act against Pike River Coal and its then boss Peter Whittall. But the charges against Peter Whittall were dropped in 2013 after Pike River Coal offered payments on behalf of the company's directors and Peter Whittall.
I think he and all of the management virtually ran away from it all. From what I gather, most of them have gone on to other careers. Their lives haven't changed much. Some are working back over here, some are overseas. I just don't think they carry that scar, I suppose, and burden that they were involved with Pike River, but for them, to me anyway, their lives just seem to go on.
$3.4 million in compensation was split between the families of the dead men in 2013. Joe says most of the $110,000 the family received went to Josh's baby girl, born 6 months after his death in May 2011.
It sort of all happened in a blur, but because of the situation of our family, like obviously Joshua's got a daughter now, so most of it went to the New Zealand family, I guess. She's a beautiful little girl, and we make sure that she knows who her dad is and she knows the story. And I'm sure as she gets older she'll have more questions. But she's a blessing. Yeah, a little piece of him. Yeah.
And it's partly for the future of her granddaughter in New Zealand that news of a confirmed re-entry has been welcomed.
With the anniversary just passing, I know how hard it has been for everyone, but I think this year was the most positive year yet. And and let's see what happens once the re-entry starts.
We wanted to ask Peter Whittall what he thought about the re-entry plan and whether he would consider returning to New Zealand if any forensic evidence is found. The veteran miner returned to his birthplace, Wollongong, in 2015, where he changed professions. He is now Chief Executive of the Illawarra Diggers Aged and Community Care Retirement Home. Checkpoint has repeatedly emailed and phoned Mr Whittall for an interview, but our requests have always been declined, as they were again last Wednesday.
My name's Logan Church. I'm a journalist from Radio New Zealand. I was keen to speak to Mr Whittall if he's around.
No, he's not available.
Oh, is there a time he would be available I could arrange to talk to him?
I don't know what his schedule is at all.
Oh, okay. Is there a secretary I could have a chat to, or...?
He's actually on site today. Yeah.
Oh, is he? Do you know when he's back?
I don't know.
No. Is there a time I could arrange to have a chat to him if he's...
No, he's not interested in talking to you. So.
Oh, okay. Is there a reason why? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know any details at all.
More from Mr Whittall soon. But back in Singleton, Jo says re-entry isn't just about the possibility of guessing her son's remains.
I think for me to find any evidence of what actually happened that day, to maybe, have someone stand up and be held accountable for what happened that day, I think that's, at this stage, is so much more important. I don't think anyone's really raised their hand to say that they were at fault.
She just wants Mr Whittall to take some responsibility.
Well, I try not to think of him that much. I'm presuming that, he's probably a bit concerned at the moment, maybe if they do find evidence.
The following day we returned to Wollongong in between filming other stories to see if Mr Whittall would speak to us. This time we found him outside.
Excuse me, Mr Whittall? Hi, my name's Logan Church. I'm a journalist from Radio New Zealand. I was keen to ask you a few quick questions about Pike River if you had a quick moment. Well, I'll ask you anyway. Do you support the re-entry of Pike River at all? Is there anything you'd like to say, Mr Whittall, to the families of the 29 men still in that mine who died on your watch?
I would say you're trespassing on private property.
Okay. If the police do find evidence, will you return to New Zealand?
No words at all from the man many Pike River families believe should be held accountable for the disaster.
I don't know that I want to see him suffer in jail, or, I don't actually know how I feel about that, but I do think that, he needs to, stand up and accept responsibility for what happened.
So what about the other Pike River Coal directors, such as John Dow, Stuart Nattrass and Ray Meyer? Where are they now, and what are their views on the government's plan for re-entry? Checkpoint spoke to John Dow, who now lives in Queensland, Australia, and owns a supermarket. He declined to be interviewed. Ray Meyer passed away earlier this year. But Stuart Nattrass was happy to go on the record. He told Checkpoint while he didn't favour re-entry, he did wonder why Mr Whittall was being shouldered with the blame.
I do wonder why Peter is the sole wearer of all blame. there's a leadership team in these organisations, and they all have joint responsibilities. So I'm not sure why the buck is in the narrative. The buck is stopping just with the CEO. I'm not sure why some of the other senior executives wouldn't also have their names being mentioned alongside Peter's.
But that still leaves no one putting their hand up and saying sorry. In the words of Josh Youfa's favourite song, the lyrics of which are framed on Joe's living room wall, there's those who chose to run, following the setting sun, and now it seems the journey has begun.
Video journalist Logan Church reporting there from Sydney, and we'll have more from Pike River Coal Director Stuart Nattrass after 6 o'clock.